Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCullum, and I am joined by an entire crew here at Moons Out 26 to talk about night vision. So, we have PSR,
Hello.
we have Brass Facts, we have Hop, we have Kit Badger, we have Luke, Ballistic Aviation.
That's correct.
Also TFB.
He's a pilot.
TFB TV, whatever.
Also TFB. So, I thought it would be cool to do some Q&A about night vision related topics, and these guys collectively have way more experience in this than I do. So we're going to put everyone together and we're going to answer some of your questions. The first one comes from Rusty, who says, like comms, night vision feels like an overwhelming topic to approach with no prior experience. For someone in the suburbs whose shooting is primarily at public ranges, what are the likely use cases this average firearms owner might have for getting into night vision? Are there practical applications outside of firearms where you'd recommend night vision to the average citizen for either preparedness or outdoor recreation? What sort of system or setup would you recommend as an affordable entry-level thing? So essentially it is, night vision's hard. Like, there's a lot of stuff here. What would you recommend to someone who doesn't have night vision, has some basic shooting experience, and is interested in the subject?
I've actually got a really good story for that. So when my first tube was a Belarusian NVM14 that I bought off of you for what is like $1,800 or something like that back in the day. So very inexpensive. But if you're in an urban area and you like to do urban exploring, that's a huge bonus to have in that, as opposed to like white light. And I suppose if you wanted to do it like the cheapest way, just get a skull crusher, a cheap tube from an Eastern Bloc country, like made by ATN or something like that, and then that's kind of it, right? You can kind of explore, camp, whatever. Maybe $2,500 out of the box, you know, out the door, I think. So pretty inexpensive.
There's like a nexus of value there, where a used PVS 14, if you can find the right one that's in decent shape, that doesn't have, like, you know, hasn't been completely ruined by somebody treating it badly. Maybe it fell off a truck, who's to say? But that's a great value because you can get Generation 3 green phosphor performance for, you know, if you look around, maybe on tax swap under 2,000, or if you want to buy a brand new warranted unit that nobody's ever going to come looking for, then you can buy like some of the new Chinese Generation 2 stuff for probably a similar price, but a little bit lesser performance. But yeah, like if you're just at a public range in a suburban area, you probably won't have a chance to actually shoot under night vision. So maybe a much harder sell. If you're really into like hiking, night hiking is way cooler because nobody else is there and it's a whole different experience. That's probably just kind of like the classic, I told my wife it was for stargazing or whatever, you know.
It's also fun to look at cats.
Expensive stuff. Yeah, you can use it as a cat finder.
Raccoons.
Night vision is one of the very few superpowers you can buy. Like, you can see in the dark, which is a pretty big deal. However, unless you have friends that have night vision, honestly, I wouldn't get it. Like, and chances are somewhere in your area, like, go to your local guns shop, especially if they sell night vision. And I know where I live, there's basically like a signal chat of a bunch of people that will get together and go shoot. Because shooting by yourself, I'm not saying it's not fun, but going out in the middle of the night, especially when it's not the middle of winter, when you have a really long night, like, that's a big ask. And then you're like, cool, like, I'm out here by myself.
It can definitely be one of those things like getting a swimming pool with your house, where it's super awesome and you use it all the time for like 2 weeks, and then it ends up kind of like sitting on a shelf.
If you end up with a core group that actually has night vision, though, like, you will actually, it becomes an easier sell with respect to the investment because you're actually going to use it. Like, you will have a core group to go do that thing.
I would say it's similar to scuba diving, to be honest. Like, unless you're doing it by yourself is not fun.
Not as fun as having friends in a group.
Yeah.
Think about how hard it is to put together a really good range trip with a bunch of guys. Now imagine that you have to get all of them interested in night vision and all of them have to be willing to stay out all night and be away from their families. It just becomes really, really difficult. To find a group of people that's that invested to shooting together is tough. But when you can pull it off, it's awesome, and then you can do stuff like this.
All right, so if we shift this back from just trying to convince people not to do it in the first place, it seems to me that there is a curve of cheap to expensive, of varying qualities, and one of the really hard things for someone getting into this is to try and figure out, how much money do I have to spend to get something that's actually useful and not just a toy, not just a crappy toy? But I don't want to spend $10,000 if that's way into the diminishing returns.
You're gonna make a bad choice though, like
Well-
unless you have a ton of money, because you have. If I hand you a like amazing $7,000 custom gun, and you've never shot before, it doesn't matter. And so if you have just disposable income, you can buy something like really nice, but until you just get in and start doing something, then you're like, okay, now I can actually appreciate maybe duels is actually worth it, like having run like a single tube or something. Like same with like a rifle. Cool, you have a mil-spec trigger that has sand in it. It doesn't matter at first because of where you are, and eventually you're like,
Yeah,
my ability can actually be
I can take that from a different direction, perhaps as a counterpoint. Like, there is absolutely, like, you don't know what you're looking at, and you need time with it. But there is a certain threshold where once you do get time with it, we're kind of assuming the guy's going to use it. And it's not going to be like a Peloton in his, in his basement almost immediately. There is a threshold where once you begin to grow, you either have a piece of equipment that can continue working with you or become useful for you. Maybe it becomes a loaner. Maybe it becomes, maybe you plus up to duel, something like that. And then there are units that you're like, well, shit, I need to sell this.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, the threshold of value that is really kind of what everyone thinks about with night vision. Because you could just go off the deep end. But right around the $2,000 to $3,000 mark is that threshold where you can get rolling right away for much cheaper, or for a little bit more, you can have something that will grow with you. For example, Pop mentioned a used PVS 14. As long as it's not completely hooped, that is something that will be useful for you going in the future. Like I ran a mono PVS 14 for a very long time. And the capability difference between that and a very high FOM set of duels is not significant. It's nice to have the nicer stuff, but it's not significant. And you can plus up, you can take the tubes out and eventually switch to duals, or it holds its value and you can sell it. That won't be true of a lot of these Chinese tubes, even though they're quite good. Yeah. And I think most importantly, the one not mentioned and the one everyone actually asks about, hey, this new set of digital night vision. And the issue with digital night vision is twofold. A, you won't be able to resell it because by the time you're ready to resell it, it's going to have completely died in value because it's no longer good and no one actually wants it in the first place. And the performance is, you'll appreciate it as someone that's never looked through analog night vision, but we're still absolutely at the point where as you get better at night vision, you put yourselves in weird places. You will outgrow digital night vision at this stage.
It doesn't compare to, for serious use, it doesn't compare to the analog stuff yet.
Right.
I totally agree with everything you're saying. My statement just like you have to start somewhere, and so the somewhere really is something that isn't garbage, and so then it's the what is not garbage.
It's like don't let people convince you that a monocular is unusable.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
You can absolutely, some people have that
You can do
experience
lots of work
because
with that.
they've tried to use a monocular that wasn't adjusted right, and it causes a competition between the eyes, and they're like, "This is horrible." You're like, "Well, you're not using it right."
As with so many things, one of the best ways to get into this is to find some friends who have it already and try out their stuff.
You guys are friends.
All right, sorry about that. Quick battery change. PSR, you're going to say you have.
I was just going to add a little something. I agree with pretty much everything that everyone said. I have some experience with digital, checking it out, doing some reviews on it, and I will, reiterate what Brass Fact said, is that you're going to obviously outgrow it eventually. It's not up to the performance. It is getting better, but like you said, by the time that you're ready to sell it, it's going to be worth at least half, maybe less than you bought it for. So it's just better to get invested in an analog unit. But with that said, there's actually 3D printed analog night vision housing that you can put together for around $1,000 if you get a tube that's like a Gen 2 Russian tube or a Chinese tube. And if you're on an extreme budget, you can 3D print the housing. If you do a little bit of soldering, you put the tube in there, and it's not extremely hard. There's a tutorial on how to do it. So if you want to start at the bare minimum, right, and still have analog, that is an option. It's kind of a cool little project.
As again with many things, there are kind of like separate development tracks for the people who want to do this or willing to do this as a project, a DIY element, and then there's the separate issue of I don't have the skills, or I don't have the time, or I just want a turnkey out of the box solution.
That's right.
To
So
me,
you need a 3D printer.
You need a 3D printer at the end of the day. That's
soldering
another
gun, a
200,
little
300
skilled
bucks.
soldering.
So
Clean
the
room.
impression I've gotten after doing matches like this for a couple of years now is sort of that sweet spot of 20% of the price for 80% of the performance is an old Gen 3 PVS 14.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that it's green. This is a thing where the Instagram influencer lifestyle can really inhibit people making good decisions, because it doesn't matter if it's a low FOM green phosphorus PVS 14, it is still going to absolutely destroy digital night vision as soon as anything actually gets really dark.
Yeah.
And if you look at like, oh, I want the military ones because they're good, so I can spend $1,000 and get a PVS 4 legit night vision scope. No, those are awful. Like by today's standards, that's one where you should spend double the money and get a PVS 14.
I think
Luke and I are still using PVS 14s with Omni 4 tubes, which are about 25 years old.
Yep. So the green duals you're using right now are 1800 FOM, absolute ancient tubes.
Yeah, but they're
And I use those tubes all the time compared to my white, almost 3,100 FOM tube. And the white versus green is a preference thing.
Yeah, it's-
FOM can matter, but in the grand scheme of things, it's been highly
your
overvalued.
3200s are ridiculous compared to
Yeah,
the
and
1800s.
and you can't really get 3200s. They're all earmarked for SOCOM and stuff like that. So, but the FOM doesn't really matter that much, right? It's a very small thing, and I think that the industry, and I was partially guilty of this, went absolutely in the wrong way when recommending how to buy your first legit tube and talking all about FOM. And you should just make sure you have a clear, clean,
mostly
thing.
unblended.
Yeah,
too.
unblended. You don't have too much spattering in there, background noise, whatever. The FOM probably doesn't matter as much as, especially from a
Also
starting
glass.
perspective. Yeah.
Glass is hugely important. I noticed like on some cheaper duals that I reviewed that the glass was just like chromatic aberrations everywhere, distortions, and then you go just a little bit higher with a little bit nicer glass, and it's just like a camera lens. You can have a really shitty camera lens and it'll look bad. You have a nice camera lens, you can see a lot more, even if the tube is not as good.
That's the bigger thing. Like you can get tubes and they have these little micro spatters just everywhere. It's not considered a blend. It's just micro spatters. And it's like almost a film. And it cuts down the transmission like 20%. Like it's awful.
The trick here is these tubes are individually manufactured, and no two are
Through
identical.
magic.
Yeah, really through modern industrial magic.
Yeah.
And so it's not like a digital product where you pick, I have spec A, spec B, spec C. Which one of these do I want? No, every tube is individual. So they all have these data sheets, and I think it's driven a lot of, for many people, it's driven decision paralysis
Right.
of,
What's the right
this
halo
number
number?
is the wrong number, and that
Right.
number is the
People
wrong
are
number.
trying to min-max it.
Yeah, and the reality is, in my opinion, don't just stop worrying about it. Find one that doesn't have any really obvious horribleness. Aim for the lower end. Like an older tube, you're going to save money without really actually sacrificing usability.
I think the data sheets are kind of like suppressor, ratings.
Right,
Where this
yeah,
stuff is
yeah,
measured in
yeah.
a lab, and the lab can tell the difference, but you cannot tell the difference.
Right, and in reality, the difference in even 5 decibels between two different suppressors, who cares? Just pick one, get it, and
Still
use
loud.
it.
For the uninformed user, if you're going to go from 0 to either digital or analog, the uninformed user is not really going to know the difference until they've had some experience with both. And that's, I think, where a lot of people get hung up, because they see all this stuff on Instagram about like, oh, digital night vision this, digital night vision that. But really, like, the price difference between the two is so close. You should probably save the extra $500 for the analog tube, because it's going to be infinitely better right off the bat.
I'll argue you will notice. Even an uninitiated person will notice digital.
Well, I'm saying right
I want-
after you
Yeah,
get
I
into
want
it.
to I put them on, instantly wanted to vomit. Like
The
there's
latency on those is super bad.
and those were good ones. Those are $3,500 ones at the time.
Oh, jeez.
Digital, yeah.
Okay, so
But that distinction goes even narrower when you do all analog.
yeah, so that was our big overarching question. I have about a half a dozen other questions from people that are on more specific topics. So
Favorite ice cream flavor?
yes, Philip says, this will be a quick one. Any value in blending analog and digital head-mounted night vision, like one analog monocular and one digital monocular that also has infrared built in, I think he means thermal, as an overlay, or is that asking for brain confusion?
That's asking for like motion sickness, I think.
Yes.
Yeah,
Some people
I brought a
can do
digital thing. I brought a digital unit, and I actually had Jordan's PVS 14 and the monocular that was digital, and I was like, oh, I wonder if I can fuse these. And no, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's
So-
really disorienting.
The digital does have a delay on it, a latency on it, and a refresh rate, where analog night vision is just, it's constant. There is no display. It's just light comes in.
There's
and
no delay
It
between
operates
the
at the speed of
information
light.
coming in through the tube and to your eye.
Yeah.
Versus
And
like
if
the
he's-
digital has to go through the processor.
If he's
Another
talking
thing-
about thermal, like there's an application, it's not pleasant. Some people can actually do a really good job with it. Like Todd Huey, Lone Star Bores, like he'll run around with a thermal in night vision, and like he'll go back and forth, and he kills a lot of things.
I almost wonder if that's what he got confused.
Isn't that things
with.
like Cody? Or is he talking about a Cody maybe? Like
No,
an
he's
E-Cody?
talking.
I think he's talking about like a thermal mono on one eye and
Yeah.
a night
Okay,
vision.
Like
so
an
yeah, that
opposite
would
on the
be
other eye.
highly inadvisable. Like,
But
the two-
thermal-
I've tried that with a FLIR breach, which is one of the higher quality, like in terms of ruggedness and usability, thermal monoculars. It's very old, but it's still, I think, in production. So FLIR breach on one eye, a PVS 14 on the other eye. The images are very dissimilar. You can spend a lot of time adjusting them, but they just will never look the same because one of them is lenses that with a phosphor screen, and the other one is a little Game Boy screen with a weird eyepiece. So it's very difficult to get them to be similar. And then your eyeballs will probably choose one to look at over the other. So what people often recommend is running the brightness of the thermal extremely low so you barely notice it
have to,
unless there's a hot spot.
Yeah.
And all that is, you're just trying to ignore it as much as you can until you just see a flicker of heat, and then you know where something is, but you're still trying to use your night vision because it's so much easier on the eyes.
However, why? And the only reason I say that is if you're going to kill something or someone, super valuable. If you're not, like, run it through the shoot house, and you're like, oh, look, everything's the same temperature. Like, it doesn't, like, unless you're doing force on force or something, it becomes incredibly valuable, but the actual use case or even training scenario you get to use that isn't there.
if
And
you're not
this
a
is-
hunter, probably more value for airsofters.
Yeah, so if
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
going out specifically for hunting, the thermal, I think, is more valuable than night vision.
Way
Yeah.
more.
You just want straight thermal.
Way more.
And if you are in one of those narrow use cases where you actually want to bridge both, you're not a beginning user.
No.
Yeah,
Like if
that's
you're
true.
looking at this and you're like, I have enough money to buy one good night vision sort of setup. Yeah, I think it's easy to go, well, okay, I'll get green. But well, I can get a better green. But for just a little more, I can get white fuzz, and then I can maybe I can get duals, and then eventually you get to this point where you've gone from I'm going to get a $2,000 old PVS 14 to now I'm into $15,000 bridged thermal white fuzz.
You can get
Panos.
quads.
Right, and you've gotten to the point where now this is totally impractical, and as you said at the beginning,
Zero use
you're going to
case.
make a bad choice, period, because
You
you don't know what features you actually want and how your brain's going to work with this stuff. If you have no night vision, just forget about bridging. Get basic introductory night vision.
This
learn
is
how
before
to
you've even
use
gotten
it.
to mounts and all that other
Right,
stuff.
yeah,
like-
learn how to use it. Learn if you are going to use it. Is it worth dumping another $10,000 into something like this?
And
You'll
your
figure
marriage
that out
survived.
later.
Yeah.
yeah. You'll figure that stuff out later. You have to start somewhere a lot simpler. Like you don't. This is the sort of thing where you start your decision process at a Toyota Corolla, and then in 6 months you're trying to figure out which F1 car you need to buy.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Adam says, "What will it take for psionics or something similar to dethrone the PVS 14?"
100 years of
Magic.
innovation.
So real quick, so when we're talking, like, really what we're asking is what is the problem with digital night vision? And for most people's application, in total fairness, there isn't really a problem. Like, unless you're doing something where there's a consequence associated with a bad shot or something like that, i.e. whether it's competition or like the highest level of competition, combat, it doesn't really matter. It's a latency thing. That's the hurdle with digital night vision, along with like battery and like how well it can pull like light.
To
But
me, the downside to it is when your ambient light starts to fall off.
Yeah.
Like
But
digital
again-
night vision's really good when you've got a lot of street lights and stuff around.
Yeah.
agreed. Or you can just turn on an illuminator. So again,
Oh, that's
until there's like a consequence associated with it, it doesn't really matter that. Like if you go out with friends and everyone has digital night vision, everyone had fun. Like it doesn't matter. Like
Okay.
I'm not saying the latency is, and some of it is way worse than others, but the latency is what we're talking about, as I see it, with respect to the problem of digital night vision. I don't know if you guys have different takes.
I ran the option 2 years ago at the entire match, and it wasn't great, but I still had a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have experience with the ADNV stuff. The G14 P2 is what I got, and I've gotten a good amount of time under it. And I think, like you were saying, like actually the refresh rate is like 100 FPS. It's decent, and it's not like the infrared color spectrum. It's just like kind of like a white phos kind of look. And the cool thing about digital in this case, not the Psionics, I don't have that much time with. I've never tried that, but it's great for like decent light. And then once you get into the shadows, that's like when it gets pretty grainy. But there is a lot of progress being made. And one of the things I was going to say earlier with regards to like the fusing both or whatever, the digital stuff, I'm not sure why they don't replicate the circle, because the circle is kind of like what you're used to. Because if you don't know,
Square is hard.
Yeah, square makes it look weird
is.
because it's disorienting, because it looks like, oh, okay, I'm looking at like a VR headset kind of thing where it's just like a square. And so I've always wondered why they don't make it a little bit bigger and a circle, just so you can kind of, if you're familiar with night vision, that way it doesn't feel like you're actually disconnected from your surroundings a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've used
that makes
both.
sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's progress being made. I think maybe 10 years from now it might be on par, but then you still are going to have latency stuff. Maybe not.
No,
But-
the PS14 is still going to be cheaper.
There's
Yeah.
something to be said about, like, if you are taking it in just a recreational kind of, like, your goal is a recreational item, even though, some people buy stuff and all they're going to do is recreational, but they didn't buy it for recreation, right? That's an important distinction to make, right? I think that's basically everyone with a home defense rifle. But these things can record, and they can record really well, and that's actually really cool. So
Yes,
if
it's
you're
a lot
staying
of
within like 50 miles, 30 miles of a major metropolitan city, there will be enough light pollution that most digital can actually function fairly well, because it usually handicaps your refresh rate, and the processor needs to kick up, and you can run much higher frame rates because you can have less light per frame. And you can actually get away with all that stuff. And then color is really cool, and then recording, like it's pretty cool to look at like night vision shooting. It's like, look at my dog. All this stuff is really cool. So if you are really locked in on the recreational side of things, you have no desire to use this in any other way. It's a really cool low light action camera that also is helmet mountable. So from that perspective, I actually don't mind digital at all.
I think it may be as little as just a couple years before digital.
I think we're half a decade out.
So the issues are its ability to work with very little light, the latency, how much time it takes to process and then display the image to you, and frame rates. And all of those things are only going to get better.
Yeah.
We don't know how long it'll take, how fast they'll get better, but they will. And eventually analog night vision is going to be looked at as this archaic, like, oh my God, can you believe they used to have to hand make these things one at a time, and everyone had its own individual spec sheet because they weren't standardized?
Battery life may be the one thing that we never really get, because like energy density seems like it's not getting
We're
much
very
higher.
much capped out on
Whereas
energy
like
density.
the
of, like, almost 10 years ago.
PVS-14 on a lithium AA can run for about 20 hours, whereas the Psionics Opsin has a very large heavy battery pack and it runs for like 3 to 6, I think.
Yeah.
So
and thermals, by the way, are even worse. Thermals
Yeah.
eat batteries like nobody's
Will an
business.
Anything with a
EMP
computer
will an EMP destroy analog nods?
it shouldn't.
In theory, like as long as I did a whole video.
I
on
bet
this.
the
This might be
flash
a bit off. There's been a lot of autism.
Don't look at the
There's
explosion
there's a
directly.
big light flash right before the EMP, and that'll probably fry your
Yeah,
analog tube.
right. Because I was going to say that would be a big advantage to analog then, because digital is obviously going to get smoked, right? By
Not
EMP?
necessarily.
No?
I think EMP is just wildly overrated.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't really looked into, is there a huge like wear and damage resistance or water ingress difference between digital night vision and analog
good
tubes?
question.
Like, are analog tubes
I'm
way
sure,
more
like,
durable?
By virtue of PVS-14 being a mill item,
It can
the
run underwater.
durability is
That's
far
another.
superior to
Yeah.
any digital. But
Yeah.
again, it goes back to the application. And when I go to the range, like, not when it's raining.
Yeah.
Like, if that's
Yeah.
you, then
That said,
it doesn't. Yeah.
We're out here at a match
And it's-
having fun, and we got rained on a couple times
Oh, yeah.
already.
No,
And
everyone, like, nods dumping rain. And no one,
Yeah, there are no
like,
problems.
you deal with
Yeah.
fogging and stuff like that. There was 0 people like, oh, my nods
I
broke.
ruined my nods.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
no.
like,
I do have to. It has. I've noticed here that we started this first question by just absolutely you need to get analog.
Yeah.
And now we're on to, well, you really actually,
some
like,
reasons to
there's
buy
all
digital.
sorts of these great advantages to digital.
It's
Be honest about who you are and what you're doing, and you
Yeah.
can justify almost anything.
But don't buy the absolute cheapest stuff. Like, if it's digital night vision and it costs $250,
Do not.
it sucks. Just
It's a toy.
don't. Or, like, if you've got the disposable money, that's the thing that you buy for your 10-year-old
Your kids.
kid as
Yeah.
a toy.
So they don't
That's-
ask to see your
Nerf ones.
$4,000
Well, yeah,
device.
yeah.
and
If
then
you want to
bring
be like the coolest uncle ever, you buy a 10-year-old $250 night vision. Like,
Yeah.
But that's its use case to me.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have Land Cruiser says, in a low light situation, how useful are red dot sights? Can an active red dot sight expose your position in a low light or no light situation? Is there light shining out of your red dot that you don't notice during the day?
Not crappy ones.
Yeah, if you first of all, if you have your brightness adjusted correctly for the ambient conditions, then somebody without like an intensifier tube is really going to have a hard time seeing it. Even then, only from very close. And then there are other like red dots, the Sig Romeo 9T and EOTechs, which have an even further reduced forward signature. But also, you could have a rearward signature. If your dot brightness is too high, it's going to be projecting light onto your face, which is going to be perhaps more visible than the dot from the front.
Now, your nods are also projecting light onto your face.
Yeah.
The red dot's going to be a little brighter, so it is something you absolutely notice in an indoor environment. You can see, like, if somebody forgot to turn off their handgun
Yeah,
in
you
their
can see it
holster
from the front.
RMR, and it's cranked on a daytime setting, or an aim point is cranked on a daylight setting, you're going to get forward and rear emissions, and you can see it, especially when it bounces off of like your arm or something like that, or your chest when you have the rifle already. But it's very similar to the, like, in terms of considerations to the light reflecting from the night vision tubes on your eye. It's something you'll notice up close if you also have night vision. But even past about like 30 feet almost, it
Some
vanishes.
stuff you will. We were doing force on force, and someone was using the Hollow Sun. I think it was the night vision. It might have been the thermal. I'm pretty sure it was the night vision. And unless you basically close that like front door, like it's visible. Like the reticle's visible, like looking back.
You can even use a whole TV screen inside of that thing. So
Yeah.
You can do it. You can even do it with an EOTech. If you bring an EOTech bright enough, you can emit a reticle onto the wall in front of you. It's pretty hilarious.
That's kind of cool.
But the newer ones, the newer holographic imitations of it, right, like the Sentinel and the Dot, don't have forward emission blockers like the way it's set up, because you can't notice it with the naked eye. You need night vision to see it on the EOTech, but with those ones, you could really see it. Like, it's hilarious how you feel like it's a video game with a reticle in front of your gun.
So the difference between the
Like
way a
a
red
Tech
dot
15 almost.
Yeah. The difference between the way a red dot and a holographic, or at least an EOTech holographic, project the dot is that the red dot shoots light forward and bounces it off of a lens at the front, and it can't capture all of that light. Whereas the EOTech does not shoot anything forward. It's coming up, or it's coming backwards at an angle through a prism. So there's some reflection that's visible from the front, but nothing is being projected out the front the same way as with the red dot.
And good optics, appropriately adjusted, non-issue.
Okay. Ryan says, does anyone mount their PVS-14 to their rifle in competition?
I've not seen it.
I'm sure someone has.
There is an old mil-spec mount. It's
Well-
a PVS-14 rifle mount that's supposed to go behind
Yeah,
an 8-point
I have
CCO.
it.
That's the original military night
Yeah.
vision. Is you have an image intensifier tube with a reticle bolted to the gun.
I mean,
But-
could you use one as a clip-on?
That's
You can-
that's pretty much
Also
the
can,
question.
yeah.
I think you
There are
certainly
dedicated
could.
clip-ons.
But the big downside of that is you have to point your rifle at whatever it is you want to be able to
You
look
still
at.
have to
Yeah.
navigate.
Or walk.
Right, and if
towards
you're
or
using it to
anything.
walk, you're holding your rifle up at your face. That's not practical.
No.
It was a thing before there was thermal.
Yeah.
Because it was a way that you could actually like aim at night without a dedicated night vision scope is what it was.
And a lot of the early military application of night vision on weapons was for sentries, for guarding,
Yeah.
for keeping watch at night, where you're in a fixed position, and it's not that big a deal to put the intensifier on the gun,
Point
and
it
yeah,
at
like you're guarding a base. Your job is, in fact, to point the gun at whatever it is that
There
you
was
want to
also
observe.
just a lack of training.
Yep.
And a lack of like you're not gonna put your PVS-14 on your M16A2 with irons. So like
Right. Yeah.
there's that.
It
And
has to
so
be in,
it was like a growing thing that happened with red dots and things, and it was like a window in time where
Yeah.
it was a thing. I think,
Yeah.
really.
but not so much anymore.
No.
I
PVS
think
stands for, I think, Portable Visual Search. So it really kind of suggests what they were originally used for. It was like, yeah, look around and then put it away and keep going.
Old Man Winter wants to know how much, if any, do muzzle devices and barrel length affect night vision setups, and how?
I think the fall on is it affects it greatly in terms of flash, right? So you can get a short barrel setup that outperforms a long barrel setup. It's not inherently just the barrel; it's flash. But longer barrels inherently produce much less flash because there's a lot less unburned powder, and vice versa. Muzzle devices suppresses everything.
Is there any concern about damage to the system? Like, are you going to have so much muzzle flash that it damages your intensifier tube?
Yep.
Or is this only a concern of the enemy will see the flash and shoot back? Which means
There's like it's a scaling thing, right? So on the bottom end, it's the tactical concern, and then it goes up and it starts getting annoying because your tube is whiting out every time you pull the trigger because your gun is so bright. And then on the very high end, I've begun to notice because for some reason I have severe mental problems, and I shoot 7.62 by 3.9 short boy things, and they are flashing so much that my very nice, modern night vision tunes are starting to wig out occasionally after a bit. And I was shooting, and the auto gain kicked on, off, off, on, and then it just maxed out and stayed maxed out, and I had to pull the battery to get it go back to normal. Yeah.
In part of what you're speaking to is the other side of it, though, which ammo has a way bigger impact on flash than people appreciate. Like, and 7.62 by 39 is usually crap ammo, and it flashes so bad.
Especially
no
when the
matter
barrel is. I was shooting a VZ58, the short boy strike back setup, and that thing flashes in the broad ass day. 7-ish.
Yeah.
So how much is a suppressor a solution to this? How much flash will come out the end of a suppressor?
It depends on which suppressor.
Yeah.
Again, there's like
No, I want a black and white yes or no answer.
Definitely
Why does
helps.
this all have to be it depends?
In general, it helps.
Some
In
of
general,
them
it
are really
absolutely
good.
helps.
But again, it comes back to you can shoot really crappy like steel cased ammo, which fortunately you can't really buy anymore. But steel cased ammo, especially like the bimetal or whatever, like it would spark so bad regardless. And so ammo consideration. But then when it comes to cans, it's like, all right, pick 2 of these 7 variables. Like, do you want cost or weight or flash or sound or attachment or whatever?
In general, though, adding a suppressor is going to reduce the amount of flash.
Yes.
Yes.
I would take a short-barreled gun, which is inherently very flashy, with a suppressor over a unsuppressed 16-inch gun with a decent muzzle device.
All day.
Now,
Okay.
it's worth noting the flash hider will outperform a suppressor
Yes.
from looking from the outside in, but there are other benefits, right? Suppressors, especially once they fill up, will get significantly brighter at distance
Yes.
in terms of the donut dot you see like 100 yards out, but that really gets into the weeds. I wanted to piggyback actually with the ammo thing. There's an interesting aspect that people don't consider. M193 in true mil spec doesn't have a flash suppressant in, so if you get like it's really hard to find because I think they just put it in
Bunch
now.
of mil, sir.
But like old Milsurp,
Yeah.
like maybe white box M193, not M855, it has no flash suppressant in, and it's horrific. It's.
That's the kind of thing you don't really notice with normal daytime.
I thought I broke my suppressor like when I was just picked up a friend's because I don't usually buy, and I'm like, what the.
But if you get like Spear law enforcement gold dot ammo, then even without a suppressor,
Yeah,
the
you're
muzzle
not gonna see
break,
much flash.
barely any flash, and the color temperature is different and everything. It is really wild to see the way different powders and different flash suppressant additives change the signature.
Okay.
And like I have as far as like how different suppressors affect it, I have a Polo K that when it started out life was brand new. It was extremely effective at cutting flash, and now it's full of poop and it sparks like crazy. Just never used to do that, and it's not titanium, so it's just there's so much crap in there, and I haven't cleaned it. So like, it'll change through the magazine probably also.
Okay, so the answer is it wildly depends, but short's worse, flashier ammo's worse. All right. David says, in goggles with a monocular, like the PVS 7, where you have 2 eyepieces, but you actually only have 1 tube and it's central, how do you hold a rifle or submachine gun? Do you tilt your head? So like the Cyclops tube between your eyes lines up with the
He
thing?
literally
asking-
just talked about this.
But he's asking about shooting passive.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah,
shoot past
you
the
don't-
PVS 7. Somebody will tell you that they've
Not
done
unless
it,
you're Doom guy.
but
I tried it.
they spent 20 minutes getting into that shooting position, and it's not really practical.
You can
Okay.
so you can kind of do it. The issue is a lot of bulk, but it's I was telling Ian about this earlier that it's worth considering a lot of just passive shooting in general. We like to imagine our eyes are here, and our eyes generally continue to be here even when we put on night vision. But the image is beginning sort of differently, so you can do some things sometimes that you can't really think you could do in terms of getting behind a scope, and that's why a lot of times I think higher mounts work. They're nice. They make shooting easier, but give it a go. You'd be surprised. Like you can make it work. In general, you shouldn't get a PVS 7.
Yeah, I feel like
Antique.
well. So where does the PVS 7 fall on our cost benefit scale? Is it
It's wild.
novelty.
Up and down.
to the
like,
whole thing.
yeah, like if it costs about the same as a PVS 14, you'd be insane to get a PVS 7. And yet sometimes a bunch of them seem to get snuck away from wherever they used to live, and then they'll hit the market for like $1,200. And most PVS 7s, I think, like if it's a PVS 7D, I think, will be Generation 3. It's going to be really old tubes, but it's still going to be Generation 3. So the actual performance of the tube is going to be pretty good. The experience of using them is bad. It's a fragile device. It's
Dimensionally, are the tubes the same? Could you pull them?
Nope. The PVS,
And
one of them,
hard pass.
I don't remember which it is, but there's a MX 1013, whatever it is. The diameter of the tube in a PVS 7 is bigger, and it's either non-inverting or inverting, whereas the PVS 14 is smaller and the other way around. So one of them requires an extra set of lenses to flip the image, and also they're bigger
So
diameter.
someone in the 3D printing world.
There are some aftermarket housings that use the larger tube to create a monocular, and there was a commercial Generation 2 night vision device from AGM, the Wolf 14, that used Russian larger diameter tubes, and that is a monocular, but it's massive and it weighs a lot because it's using such a bigger tube and it has more complicated lenses, I think. Maybe you could buy a really cheap PVS 7, harvest the tube, put it in an aftermarket housing, and get a pretty good setup for cheap, but it's not going to be that cheap.
And
Maybe you
full
save
of
$200. And then
It's also a lot of work.
you're
for-
well into the
And then if you're building
project
it-
gun?
Don't buy one.
if you're building it yourself, it's going to get cat hair and moisture in
It'd
it.
be cool
so-
for the novelty. It looks
it
different,
looks cool.
right?
I mean,
Yeah, it's way different
the
than any
Metal
other.
Gear, right? Is
Yeah.
that what it was? Yeah.
All right, so basically, don't buy a PVS 7. Buy a PVS 14, and then this question is not an issue.
unless it's like half price, in which case
Yeah.
you might enjoy walking around with it.
It's
Yeah,
still a bad choice.
You got
It's
a
like
good tax
G-Walk
return.
phone.
Like you could spend it on worse things.
All right, and Alan says, aside from the techno magic that goes into the tubes themselves, what have been the most significant innovations in the more mundane aspects of the device? Controls, weapon setups, adjacent gear that historically represent the major steps in the use of night vision devices over time, and what drove these changes?
Oh man, like the controls on a PVS 14, like being able to adjust, like the intensity of it, the brightness, and all that. That's something that's absent on almost every other analog tube out there.
Yeah,
That's
a lot of
important.
devices started removing features that were deemed not that useful, like the onboard illuminator, which is really not good as an illuminator. It's more for signaling. People are like, well, I've literally never used that, so a lot of housings don't have it. Manual gain is to control the brightness of the devices. A lot
Super
of
narrow
tubes
use.
don't have that,
Yeah.
so it's like, why even have that knob? Because most of the cheap surplus tubes people are buying are aviation tubes that don't have manual gain. So a lot of housings strip features out just to save cost, to save bulk. But then I know
And-
Brock has done a lot of housings that go the other way, where they're like, we're going to start piling in features because people want panning and all that kind of stuff.
One of the big ones I would say is who made that one again? That mount right there.
The
Nocturne?
Alpha
Nocturne?
Alpha Nocturne.
Nocturne.
Yeah.
Nocturne mount. Like that's actually an improvement. Like a
Nocturne is
meaningful-
the title sponsor of
They
Moons
are.
Out 2026.
That's actually like a meaningful improvement though, because all of the mounts out there are pretty much garbage, largely except the Wilcox mount, which is like $500, and that actually improves on the Wilcox mount and is cheaper and lighter.
Yeah, this is significantly better than
Like-
even a G24.
So there's like little incremental things I think like that are actually really nice, because it doesn't matter how great your nods are, like you have to have a mount, and if your mount is garbage, like the experience is garbage.
Right. If the nods move around, if they're not
Yeah.
solid,
Yeah.
and that comes into, well, how are you mounting this thing on your head too?
Yeah. Yes.
Those, like the helmet mounting solutions have improved. One of the things I noticed on mine is, I have this flip up mount, that sort of thing you see most of the time. and when I flip it up, it automatically turns the knobs off.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be using them when they're sitting up here. Saves battery. That is definitely something that earlier generation devices didn't do.
One thing I would say is, like, rather than putting a wall in front of yourself like, you will buy a helmet, and it can be like a ProTech helmet with a shroud. Like, that eventually matters the more time you spend, but you can actually get into that fairly cheap. You don't really want to cheap out on a mount, because you can buy a good mount like that right there and eventually run like quads on it.
Yeah.
Like, it'll scale, like it'll be lasting, and then eventually you need a tube. Once you have that, the cheapest thing you can buy to get into it, I think, is probably, honestly, and probably the best thing at the cheapest price, Streamlight VIR2. It's a white light, it's an IR illuminator and IR laser for like $200 or something like that.
Yeah.
And the other part is, as long as you have something to illuminate and you have a fairly decent red dot, you can go shoot. Like, you do not need a laser to go shoot night vision. Like,
Yeah.
that is not a
Passive
real
aiming
thing.
is viable.
That's actually how I did the entire match last night when we ran the staff match. I
Same.
actually used an EOTech that does not have the night vision capability.
Per person EOTech. Yeah.
So I turned it all the way down. It was still pretty bright, but workable, and nothing on the gun except an EOTech and a night vision tube on my head, and I did surprisingly well. I don't know what the scores are yet because we haven't actually done the main match as of this moment,
But yeah, like,
it
that
worked.
does not need to be an additional cost when you're looking at getting in. Like, you can get a Surefire Vampire or you can get an Enforce, like, they're dual, like, whatever. But shooting passive, you will probably shoot way better shooting passive than you will shooting with a laser initially also. Like,
Yeah, I mean, but
That was-
the price of lasers, I was going to say, that's one thing that's become way more accessible with some of these China contributing to the marketplace and kind of really undercutting. Like, if you go with something a little bit more, I mean, $800 for a laser might sound like a lot if you're not into night vision, but $800 for the Holosun Iris is like a pretty good place to be, I think, for just like getting the capable laser. It's not perfect, but it's also not $3,500.
Right.
Know?
We've seen a shift in IR laser modules for rifles that mirrors sort of what we've seen in red dots,
Yeah,
where
for sure.
the price has come down a lot. The quality has come up a lot. It wasn't that long ago that an infrared laser for your rifle was either like, I don't even know how to find one to buy, and when I do, it's going to be like $3,000, and it's going to be kind of janky. And now, like you say, things like Holosun's new lasers are relatively inexpensive, high quality, high features.
I would say maybe to take the question in a different direction in terms of gear and sort of philosophy innovations. You know, we started with lasers were very rare, right? Like, you get it in your little baggie in the military, and that's the only ones that get to play with the laser. Then lasers become the only way that people were using night visions for a very long time. It's like, shut up, use the laser. There's a reason why. Like, it provides all the things you need. And now we're seeing a much more kind of probably the final iteration before thermal really kind of kicks this in the nuts, is night vision is predominantly a movement tool. You will probably have a laser on your gun, but more so in the same way you have a white light on a military rifle. It's not used nearly as much, but there are times where you want that extra illumination. And in addition to a magnified optic, you probably also have a way to passively aim. And that's why we're seeing these monstrous stacks of crap on your rifle, because you generally want to active aim, but you also need an ability to go passive if your laser loses zero, if the situation demands that you don't use it. So we've kind of seen the shift.
For a very long time, the military application of night vision was a very non-near-peer situation. It was going after the Taliban and various, low-tech militia type forces who didn't have night vision at all. And so the fact that you're running around with these floodlights and lasers blaring all over the place, if you had done that, well, if you do that in Ukraine today, you show up like it's midnight and you're just shining spotlights around in the air. And that has led to a lot more of, okay, we want to cut the emissions.
Yeah.
Let's not spotlight ourselves, because all of a sudden there's a real possibility that the bad guys can actually see that too.
Yeah.
In fact, that's also led to lasers and infrared night vision devices in a slightly different spectrum.
It's like
Oh yeah,
clad.
the out of band
The,
stuff.
Right,
the
yeah.
mall clad or whatever it's called
Yeah.
does that, and it's a laser that works with a very specific set of night vision.
Aren't digitals
Whoa.
less prone
It's
to?
incredibly hush hush, or not hush hush. Everyone knows it exists, but you can't really get your hands
You're
or
not
even look
buying
at them
Yeah.
because the whole point is that it never
Yeah.
gets out there. Because once
Yeah.
the code is
Yeah.
correct,
It's one of those things that will work fine until it will very suddenly not work at all.
Yeah.
So it's a short-term solution. But
I think Photonuses can see them. Ironically,
Yeah,
Oops.
yeah. Photonus has a much wider sensitivity range than most Gen 3 night vision for whatever reason.
Huh.
It kind of, to be extremely nerdy, it's like how they have to keep reprogramming the phasers to kill the Borg in Star Trek.
Oh yeah.
exactly. There's
And
only a
all they
certain
do is
number
they
of
adapt.
options. Once you run out, you're out. All right, we have one more question. That comes from JWL. How far away do you think we are from getting night vision with an implemented color spectrum, i.e. more than the black and white that we have now? Although green is often used too, it's basically a monocolored thing with a filter. In short, going from black and white TV to color TV, but with nods. Is this a thing? Do we expect this to come?
so I mean, in digital, it's already
Yeah.
here, right?
Right.
You can differentiate between the different wavelengths, but the way night vision is working, it's essentially it's a grid and it's electron emission technology. So it doesn't actually care about the wavelength. It's just taking in a photon, which triggers a sort of a mechanism, and then that causes that photon to be essentially turned into 3 photons, and then or it's actually a lot more than 3, but that's how you get
Amplifies it.
you get the amplification. So the night vision tubes, as they are right now, have no way of being able to tell different wavelengths of light. So without just fundamentally changing the technology, we're not talking Gen 2 to Gen 3. We're talking completely
whole
new
new-
technology.
Different
We will
mechanism
we will
for
never see
amplifying.
People are kind of getting there with fused
Mhm.
stuff,
Yeah.
which is
Thermal
thermal,
fusion.
which is giving you at least the appearance of colors and stuff like
Well, and that's
that.
an overlay, though, right?
The Army Fusion is very interesting in that regard. It's a thermal fusion technology, but it's a thermal screen over a night vision display, so you can do the ODST thing where it's an outline, but you can also do more traditional thermal modes, which are, it's a different color spectrum, but in theory, there's nothing stopping you from actually pulling light
Right.
from something like that, because there are many thermals that are essentially just night vision and thermal packed into one. Right? The DNTs do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like the short answer would be yes, but not without the implementation of something digital.
Right.
Yeah.
Involved.
Yeah, it's like
It's gonna be a new animal.
It's unlikely we'll ever, in this side of the century, get a new type of night vision that isn't digital.
And lightsabers.
Yeah, the
There's
color
not
that
a-
you see on a night vision device is the phosphor screen, and so the color is just determined by whatever
can use
phosphor they
whatever,
think
yeah.
is the most pleasant. Like how old computers used to have monochrome amber because that was the best color, and then they went to green, and then they actually got like real LCD screens and stuff.
Which
So-
is actually interesting, like the green. The green is basically in the middle of the visual spectrum, so
Right.
technically your eye can see the most amount of shades of green
Mhm.
than any other color, which is why they used it. However, in application with white phos, it's more of a contrast thing
Yeah.
Mhm.
between white and black that actually, at least perception-wise, makes it easier
Yeah.
to see things, like
Yeah.
depending on
using
the
a
person.
different part of the eye.
Yeah.
Really, a different element of the eye.
But yeah, and that's just the color of the screen, which is why the rumor you hear about red night vision prototypes in Vietnam illuminating like demons and stuff. It's the exact same thing. They just changed the color filter. So if the demons are visible under the red filter, they're going to be visible under the green filter. I really, really detest that story.
It's very interesting because there is a noticeable markup for white over green.
Yeah.
It's a singular process very late in the assembly that has no difference in cost in manufacture.
Yeah.
It's just that the whites are significantly more in
desirable.
demand, which is interesting because maybe I'm just messed up in being a hipster, but I actually
I
generally
don't
find
mind
myself
green.
preferring green a
Yeah.
lot of times in terms of seeing things because
Or-
I see the dark and the brights.
Well, for the amount of
On
time,
green.
it can actually be less strain on the eyes
Mhm.
also.
Mm.
Like depending on the amount of time. But again, how often and how much time do people like spend under knots?
Yeah.
Where it's like kind of a non-issue.
Oh, you know what? There's one other question that we should address. I didn't have anyone specifically ask this, but if we all pretty much agree that duals are better than singles, although maybe not justified for the cost for your application, but if someone was giving it to you for free, you'd always take duals over singles. Does that then also extend to quads are better than duals?
I don't know.
think so.
Quads they give you more like visual on the side, but they're also extremely heavy.
There's a weight penalty. Also, just
Power
like
penalty too.
a,
You have to
like,
carry a battery pack
a
in addition.
movement
Fitting
penalty,
your
like
head
your,
through a door.
Yeah.
yeah, like it's, and then it's what's the application?
Yeah.
Like, does
Flying?
that guy matter as I come through the door? Oh wait, you're doing up drills at 10 yards.
Yeah. No.
That guy doesn't actually matter anymore. Like,
Yeah. I guess aviation would be a big one. I think that's probably.
Yeah, I think in confined spaces, quads
Yeah.
make way more sense.
The guys that I've talked to
Driving.
who use them
Yeah,
in the
driving.
military, it's been like if they're in a really high end unit with a huge budget, they'll have quads and they sit on the shelf except for the specific occasions when they are called for, like very close range CQB type stuff or flying, obviously.
Yeah.
But in general, the sweet spot is duels.
Yeah, the sweet spot. Well, maybe also if you really want that panoramic view, is just get something that can articulate a little
Yeah.
bit, so you don't get that just single circle. You get like just more of like an oval almost that gives you a little bit more, and kind of it can make a big difference.
It makes
It
a
does-
huge
yeah.
difference.
It does come with a tail though too, in that the way the tubes are made, the best, well, pretty much any lens, the best part of the lens is directly
Right in
in
the
the
middle.
center of the lens, and so you're using the worst parts of the lens to see directly in front
Yeah,
of you with
yeah.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a lot of time with the running panos, and I don't mind that as much because it's not like you're running them like this where the two edges are. There's significant
Oh,
overlap.
there's definitely overlap.
So you can do a lot of really cool stuff. Like you can drive and you can finally do stuff that your muscle memory is used to, where you see your rear
You
view
get
mirror
some
with a slight
peripheral.
head tilt instead of just doing the thing. Or when I was doing e-bike kind of stuff, and it's much more natural feeling to run something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But ironically, in a lot of those pano setups, especially the bridged PVS-14s, you're approaching actually the same weight as the L3 quad setup.
Damn.
And having run that for like a match, one of these, and more, it is an awful experience to have. 29 ounces cantilevered out in front of your head, and you feel it in your neck, and you go to bed, and there's nothing on your head, and your neck is just burning all night long.
Man.
So they're that's probably the biggest thing. It's just this huge mass that kind of like it feels like when your mouse starts lagging on your computer, it trails behind where it should be. Like that's what it feels like a lot of times. So I imagine that translates to quad setups. I think there are some quads circling around in this match because Nocturne's here.
Oh,
that'd be
yeah.
cool. I haven't seen them yet. But
Yeah,
we haven't been out there. Yet.
What are they called? The
Oh, they're
Chimera?
new
Chimera,
housing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you can turn into a bug because they fold like
Yeah.
this.
Well, yeah.
That
That's
is cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
All right. Anything else you guys want to throw out there for folks? I think we pretty well covered all the questions we got in.
Thanks
Night
for
vision
having
is really cool. You put on
It's
night
very
vision
cool.
in your, you've closed the door to your laundry room, and you're like, wow.
me. Yeah.
I mean, it's just give it a go. It's fun.
It really is a superpower.
It does ruin your life.
Yeah,
to a
like to
degree.
go back to what Ivan said, it really is like the only purchasable superpower right now.
It's also,
I guess
well, you
besides,
can breathe underwater. You
besides
can fly
Tren, I guess,
skydive,
but I mean,
it's
you
the
don't want to
cheapest
go
to get
down
into.
that route.
That one has some notable debuffs. But
Yeah.
night vision's also like, I mean, it's regulated outside of the country, but if you're an American in America, you can just buy whatever night vision you can find and afford.
Yep.
Which is
Yeah.
pretty cool. So it's
Yes.
a more accessible legal form of fun than some of the other stuff we get up to.
For sure.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you to everybody for joining me
Thanks
here
for having us
today.
on.
PSR. Everyone here is on YouTube. So
Yes.
PSR, Brass Facts, Hop, just Hop,
No, just
Just
stop. Just stop.
Kit Patrick, and Ballistic Aviation.
Correct.
Thanks for watching, guys.
See ya.
Time again.
She does that kind of.
The clouds can hear you.
We go.
It's not like sprinkling anymore.